Ayoki, Hutke, hello, how are you? Welcome to the Cultural Revitalization and Indigenization webinar. This will be the last of 5 webinars in the series this November, where all organizations involved came together to honor the diversity of Indigenous peoples. My name is Charles Houston. I'm Karuk Badadad, and I'm the Strategic Relations Coordinator at 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. And I'm with you today from the unceded lands of the Wiyot people. This series has illuminated and honored Indigenous peoples through this medium with many diverse topics. The Klamath River dam removals, sacred sites, Indigenous women, climate justice, and today's topic of cultural revitalization and indigenization. For almost 50 years, 7th Generation Fund has been committed to amplifying the Indigenous voice any way we can, and these webinars are a testament to that. Working with multiple organizations making the series possible has benefited all involved. I'd like to thank the sponsors, as this webinar series is co-sponsored by the IF20 Anti-Racism Initiative, the International Academy of Multicultural Cooperation, United Religious Initiative, and the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. Today we have diverse cultural and community workers creating justice by using tradition and modernity to make good medicine for their people. We are joined today with Jennifer Randolph of the Wampanoag Nation, where she is the Executive Director and Board President of the Northeast Native Network of Kinship and Healing, located in Massachusetts. Also with us today is Lucille Contreras of the Lipan Apache, and she is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, located in Texas. I'm also going to speak a little bit about the ceremonial and cultural revitalization happening in Karuk country here in Northern California. Today's webinar is titled Cultural Revitalization and Indigenization. But what is cultural revitalization and what is indigenization? Cultural revitalization is a process where Indigenous peoples are rejuvenating old ceremonial and cultural livelihoods that may have lied dormant due to the nature of cannibalistic colonization. Indigenization is a reclamation of space, culture, and being without any bonds tied to said cannibal colonization, while asserting Indigenous sovereignty. For Indigenous peoples, we are in a transformative moment in time. We're enjoying a lot to offer ourselves, our universe, our surrounding communities, as well as the global population in general. This year, I had an opportunity to take a journey connecting with what we call the old ones, while simultaneously we were creating new ones, myself included. Pa'a is a Karuk word for canoe. Pa'a is an integral part of culture in all Indigenous communities around bodies of water. Ours is no different, but our Pa'a have been missing for some time. A great flood happened in 1964, and all of our Karuk canoes that were in the water were swept away. After this catastrophe, no one made them again for decades, not even for ceremonies, where Pa'a is traditionally a participant. And this has left a major gap in our culture, in our communities for many years. In May this year, the 7th Generation Fund, the Karuk Reconstruction Project, Nature's Rights Council, and the Karuk Tribal Assistance for Needy Families, as well as Ancestral Guard, all work together to hold 3 different weekend workshops on how to build a traditional pa'a. These workshops were held in 3 different Karuk communities in Orleans, California, Happy Camp, and Wairika. What came out of these workshops was the first pa'a made by Karuk people in over 60 years. This pa'a was celebrated at an event, a culmination event in July, where we introduced pa'a back to our community with a celebration offering rides, food, and community bonding. The event was heralded by our communities, and much inspiration has come from this experience. With varying degrees of participation in each Karuk community, the level of interest and revival of the old ways was measured far beyond actual participation. Now, we have Karuk people up and down our communities with plans to build more canoes, more traditional houses, and more traditional dancing grounds from Orleans all the way up to our reservation in Wairika. Over the years, we've seen a lot of Indigenous people asserting their cultural sovereignty in many ways. For example, the Makah in Washington state revived their whaling hunting traditions in the late 90s. I was invited and witnessed the Kupa people of Southern California revive their bear dance around 1995. The Zapatistas' call to the world on January 1st, 1994, to respect Indigenous ways, culture, and philosophy to create a better place for all to live. And Indigenous language programs are rising up everywhere from places white academic institutions swore were dead or dying. And more recently, in 2013 in the Dene language, and in 2024 in the Ojibwe language, Star Wars has been translated and shown on the big screen. Indigenous peoples are thriving. More recent examples of outstanding Indigenous cultural work the seventh generation supports can be seen with the Alaskan Native Birthkeepers Network, the Ottoman Collective, and the Sailor School in Spokane, Washington. Far too long has the Indigenous story been told about the loss of our ancestors and lands. Though this is important to remember, this form of identity leaves little room for many other ingenuities our diverse civilizations are creating, such as the two speakers we have with us today. This webinar focuses on some current works happening in Indigenous country, and we will listen to some wonderful stories of a new era. Panelists will share their work today on how that work is making a difference in their respective Indigenous community. Now, I'd like to first introduce our first speaker, Jennifer Randolph, Northeast Native Network of Kinship and Healing. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm the executive director of Kinship Heals. It's what we call our organization for short because it's a long name. And I'm also enrolled in the Wampanoag tribe of Gehedaquina. And I think when I introduce myself, one of the most important things to point out for me is that I'm a mom of 3 girls, and they are by far the most important thing in my life. So Kinship Heals was founded to end violence against Native people, particularly intimate partner violence and sexual violence, stalking and sex trafficking. We believe that the best way to accomplish this was not to bring in clinical experts from the outside world, but rather to support and increase the capacity of our own tribal community members to support and heal one another, to look at ways of our culture to help prevent violence. We knew that prior to colonization, we didn't have these kind of issues within our community. So we wanted to take a look back into what we had in our ways that prevented these things from happening, and then try to find modern ways of bringing them back into practice to sort of weave a safety net for our people. And to give you a bit of a background history, prior to Kinship Heals in 2010, my tribe had received a grant to address domestic violence, and there was a lot of contention around that. A lot of our tribal leaders didn't believe that we had domestic violence within our community because no one was really talking about it. And as a survivor, and looking at the people I knew within my community, my relatives, I knew that just wasn't the case. So I was able to create a community assessment project, which showed that our community was right in line with the national statistics, which is, 84% of Native women experience violence in their lifetime. And our statistics are the highest among any demographic in the country. So we had a lot of work to do, and bringing those statistics to our tribal leaders, they allowed us to move forward with work. And we got to work doing a lot of community education, training, and outreach. And I ran the tribal program for about 10 years. But during that time, there was a core group of women from people who were providing us technical assistance, but also the community members who were there as allies and supportive survivors. And then also people who had shown up to our program as program participants who had were able to heal and move on and to grow into spaces of being volunteers and support. We were talking during COVID. It was December during COVID, and one of the girls from our sister tribe had been kidnapped and found murdered in Florida. And we were talking about how can this happen so close to us? And what we came up with is that one of the protective factors that we were missing is really around relationships. we were doing this work in a silo, kind of in isolation, just as a tribal government program alone, without working with our sister tribes, without working with non-native service providers, just trying to do this by ourselves. And that's just not traditionally how we did things as a people. We have our relatives, we had our kinship bonds, we had structures and ties with those around us. And so we decided to not work in that system anymore and to create a nonprofit and to break out as a separate entity so that we could start addressing the violence in a more traditional way. And that started with relationships and building community with the different tribes within our area, as well as recognizing sovereignty rights with individuals. Our people who came to use our services had really rights to determine how they wanted to heal, how they wanted to move forward. And we also wanted to focus that it's okay not to be perfect. And that was really showed up to be really important in our work. So when we first started our programming, we thought about, wouldn't it be great to be able to provide our own foods like we used to? You know, women controlled the food systems. How could we do that present day? And we started these little container gardens because none of us knew what we were doing with planting and growing food. And it was kind of funny. One of our program participants played a joke on someone else. They put in a little floret of broccoli in her seed starter. And then the next time the other woman came, she looked, she thought like that was her broccoli. It grew. And I was feeling really bad for her. And I'm trying to tell her broccoli doesn't grow like that. And she turned to me and she says, well, yours may not, but mine does. So we had a long way to go. And we learned by doing and by being in relationship and learning from each other, and also by the practice of doing it. And now 10 years later, we have our traditional Three Sisters gardens with our original corn. We're growing sweetgrass, you know, and different things. And it wasn't because some expert came in to teach us. It came from being in relationship with plants, being in relationship with one another. I think that is really key in revitalizing the culture. It's not about just bringing this expert in to teach you how to do it the right way. It's about making mistakes and learning. And that's like the benefit of having good, healthy relationships, which was really, I think, a foundational piece in what we are doing. So today we have our traditional Three Sisters Gardens. We have youth projects where we support our youth in learning dance classes. They do traditional talking circles in the high school. We have an equine therapy program. We're doing a lot, but what we don't have is a shelter, and we don't own any land. Well, we do now. Back a year ago, we were able to purchase through donations 8 acres of land. And that's where we would like to build a shelter and also provide programs. And in that space, we're going to be putting a traditional food forest, growing our traditional Three Sisters garden, food pantry, and also looking at traditional ways of storing food that doesn't require energy, those sort of practices. What we're really looking to do is have space for ceremonies, traditional meditation spaces, traditional medicines, and it's about rebuilding healthy ecosystems where we can be in good relationship with not just each other, but with ourselves, but also, you know, our relatives, our plant relatives, and our animal relatives. So that's our big project that we're currently working on. And I'm already seeing a difference in our youth just with the programs that we've implemented. They're watching and experiencing the work of the gardens and know that relationships take work, and to understand boundaries and to understand how to be a good relative to one another. And it gives me hope that what we're doing is really making a difference.
Wow, that is really great work, Jennifer. Thank you for sharing the story. And I definitely have a lot of questions to ask in our Q&A section. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Lucille Contreras from the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. where Lucille is the Chief Executive Officer and founder. Lucille, welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you, everybody. Dazo. My name is Lucille Contreras. I'm Lipan Apache on my father's side and Mexica or Aztec on my mother's side. And I am the CEO and founder of Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. Our mission and our goals are to reconnect Texas Indigenous communities to each other by rekindling our kinship as relatives. We do that by connecting to the buffalo as a relative as well. We currently live on 77 acres in South Central Texas, in the center of our homelands of the Lipan Apache. We're centrally based between San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Corpus Christi, and we serve all of the Texas Indigenous community. Many people are surprised to know that there are still many Indigenous communities in Texas that have always been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Some of those tribes you may have heard of, like the Karankawa and the Kickapoo, or the Comanche, or the Kiowa. And some you may not have heard of, like the Koi Tecano, the Carrizo Come Crudo, the Payaya, and so many others. And so the work we do is based and centered around the buffalo. In the center of our entire project and all the initiatives that we do is our focus on the water's relationship to the soil, to the grass, to the buffalo. And then surrounding that is our ancestral knowledge and our prayers that guide us with the work that we do. And then stemming from that, if you imagine a wheel all the way around, are the staff that work to implement the programs. Our programs are food sovereignty programs. We're really happy and proud of one program in particular called Meat for Mamas. In our Meat for Mamas program, we provide USDA certified bison meat to Indigenous women that are in different stages of pregnancy in Texas. We know from data and from our own life stories that Indigenous women suffer the highest rate of gestational diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And so in our quest to be able to help all of our future generations in Texas, especially be healthy, we want to do that in utero. So we currently provide for about 10 mothers. Some of our mothers have already given birth and are still receiving bison meat through postpartum, and others are still early in their pregnancy. And another food sovereignty program we do is we provide USDA certified bison meat online, and we accept EBT. We're the only bison caretaker that provides this healthy, nutritious, traditional food of our people, our ancestors, the Lipan Apache and other buffalo nations. With communities and the demographics of our communities that use EBT or food stamps. So with that, we're able to provide bison meat to anybody in Turtle Island that wishes to have it, no matter what their economic situation is. And we also donate to many food banks. We have a freezer, a moving freezer, that we pull with our trailer, where we also travel to communities to be able to share this bison meat. For example, also earlier this year, we donated 60 pounds of ground bison meat to the elders in Mescalero. Like I mentioned, many people don't realize that there are still Indigenous people in Texas, and we are part of the unfederally recognized but still sovereign using the United Nations declarations of Indigenous peoples' rights. And through that, we're doing other work like Texas IndigiDNA. Our Texas IndigiDNA project is our hypothesis is that the 90% Hispanic people communities in Texas are actually 40% or more indigenous to Texas. So we've been working with some of the DNA companies to procure tests and using software to be able to triangulate and connect people's DNA and our descendancy. And we also lay that over maps showing the migration of the buffalo. Just as the buffalo once traveled north to south, we as Indigenous people, many of us followed the buffalo and the deer and the nuts and all the different times of harvesting plants. And so we try our best using modern ways, modern technology, with traditional values and traditional life ways. In our buffalo caretaking, we are predominantly Indigenous women that do all of the work of the buffalo caretaking. That is, today it's called regenerative ag, but it does surround the traditional ecological knowledge and skills of our Indigenous people on how we relate to the soil and how we relate to our plant relatives, as Sister Jennifer mentioned, and also the four-leggeds, the buffalo relatives. So the buffalo, as they walk on the earth, the very action of walking on the earth is healing the soil. They aerate the soil. They wake up the seed bank. They recreate these beautiful prairies, and something that we have witnessed here on the property that we caretake for, 77 acres in South Central Texas, the headquarters of Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, where currently we caretake for 28 head of buffalo that are pure bison, genetic bison. Now, many people also ask, why do you say buffalo? Why do you say bison? I also say Iani. They're all the same. So these are the words that we as Indigenous people have accepted. The buffalo, the scientific term is bison. The Lipan-Apache word is Iani. And many other tribes have their own, such as the Pite Oyate or the Ini. And so we're embarking on an event coming up where at one time, buffalo used to migrate naturally north to south from Canada into northern Mexico. Because of the way that our land is broken up now, that is not possible. So we are currently using trucks, and we are planning to ship our first buffalo that we ever received to Canada as a way to recreate the kinship between the Buffalo Nations in the north and the Buffalo Nations in the south. And thank you so much for inviting me to be here, part of this very awesome and profound webinar, as the work that we do as Indigenous people to re-engage with each other as kinships is so important to the healing of the land and all of the future generations.
Thank you so much, Lucille. That was wonderful. So much information. We're now going to move into our question and answer period, and still waiting for some questions to come in. So I'd like to maybe go back to Jennifer's speech, and I'm I love the website, everything that I read online, and I'm really interested in, like, share maybe a little more if you can, like the traditional methods you were talking about in terms of healing your community. Like, what kinds of traditional methods are you utilizing?
To say that this is the exact ceremony or exact method that we used. We are one of the first contact tribes, and we have Thanksgiving right around the corner, and we've been in contact with Europeans actually before Thanksgiving. So some of those exact ways were lost. We don't have them. So some of the things that we had to do was to borrow from other communities, and some of the things that we're looking at is indigenous to everybody, like traditional talking circles. It's not necessarily Wampanoag, but it's indigenous to everyone. So we'll sit down, we'll do traditional talking circles, doing cleansing with our traditional medicine, sage. There's cedar baths, there's sweetgrass. There's some things that we do with just writing down some of the hurtful things that have happened, things that you want to give away, and putting that into fire, and washing that with medicine and burying it, recreating those ceremonies, and borrowing things from other communities, I think has been really helpful with people. But it's also not just those particular ceremonies that make you heal and feel better. It's also the practices of using your culture. So learning how to make moccasins when you didn't know how to make moccasins before, learning how to grow sweetgrass, being in relationship with that grass, coming out to a garden and being in relationship with our traditional corn and our traditional beans, and preparing that is a way of not just restoring our culture as a whole, but restoring yourself. It's medicine, and being with other people is also medicine to your soul. There's certain things that being in relationship with plants and the world around you, the natural space, can do that nothing else can do for you. And going back to those spaces is really healing for people.
I completely agree. I love the groundedness you're talking about with, working with the earth and trying to, utilize sweetgrass, an important medicine for a lot of indigenous communities, right? And that's wonderful. I'm just curious, with the healing processes you have with them, are you getting any like feedback from, I don't know how to say this, the clinical sector, like social workers or therapists, et cetera? Are you able to pique their interest and work with them at all?
So actually healing it takes time. It's a journey. And I wonder if there is a point where you're like, okay, I'm all better now. And it's multifaceted. So it's not just like healing through ceremonies. It's also like understand what happened to you. So we have a lot of books and a lot of educational materials and documentaries so that people understand the whole cycles of abuse and what has happened. Just understanding in your brain is a part of the healing. I think all aspects, where it's not just our bodies, it's also our minds, it's our spirits, it's all those connections. And we also encourage people to go to have regular mental health therapy as well, to use all kind of different ways so that you can heal your whole self. And we know statistics have shown, and studies have shown, and mental health therapies also show that your culture is actually the most effective way to heal from these sorts of traumas, in addition to those other pieces. We talk about how you eat, how you nourish your body. Those things, there's certain things in certain foods that help you feel better. Exercise, getting out and canoeing, that raises and releases natural endorphins. All of these things that are dancing, these things that are traditional to us, that were woven into our culture, that we naturally did, are actually natural healing methodologies. So there's a lot of science and a lot of clinicians who support that. But I think working with clinicians is also really important. We find a lot of people are hesitant to do that, though. There's a lot of distrust working with the mental health professionals. So we offer as much as we can, and people pick and choose what they feel is important to them and what will work for them, and we support them in that.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That is great insight to how to heal. And Lucille, I think that that's great. I read, so much information on your website. Can you, I just love that you have 77 acres for your buffalo to roam. And I think that I read something about you're trying to attain more land adjacent to what you already have.
So we're currently actually in the process of closing on a property, 150 acres, which is an hour and a half away from our current location. And this second property came about as a result of a partnership with the Conservation Fund. Conservation Fund is a national organization that matches up farmers and ranchers that are basically like aging out as the current farming and ranching generation ages out and there are no longer family that want to continue the work. The Conservation Fund helps matches up people. For example, that is what happened with us. And we are going to start reoccupying our own traditional homeland of 150 acres on December 10th. And it's really coming full circle because at one time, to put it in perspective, this property was acquired by this non-native family in 1878. And Geronimo was taken as a prisoner of war in 1886 and was held in San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston briefly on the way to Florida. So the 1870s, 1880s in Texas was a very, very dangerous time, especially for Apaches. And so for this property to come full circle is just amazing. And we will be moving the majority of our buffalo herd there. And we're embarking on a capital land campaign to be able to raise money that we need to pay back the Conservation Fund. So it's sort of like a lease of 3 years to raise $1.5 million to be able to pay for that property. And it also includes our mineral rights, which is so rare to be able to reacquire your own homeland and then still have the mineral rights because of the state of Texas being an incredibly very high oil priority place. So we're really grateful, and we're going to continue our programs there. Like we just finished our youth camp. Literally today was the 4th day of youth camp where we had a 12 to 15 youth learning fishing, fire making, identifying plants, and some bison handling and bison caretaking. And these were young boys and girls ages 8 to 16 years old with their parents and families. And this is all of the kinship building, which we're helping each other relearn our skills. Like, I wholeheartedly agree with what Jennifer was saying, that there are certain things that are unique to each one of us as Indigenous communities. And there are certain things that are common, like honoring our elders and honoring our women and honoring our veterans and the whole process of creating your own moccasins is reconnecting with who we are. And so with this additional land comes more healing and more connection for our Indigenous communities.
Yes, I agree 100% with you. So wow, another 150 acres and you got 77 acres. That's a lot of land and that's a lot of buffalo. Not sure if I'm saying this right because I don't know our buffalo relative very well. Okay, what is the difference between, the buffalo and bison the genetic piece that you were talking about?
There's nothing, there's no difference. It's the same animal. It's just a different way that we call it. Because when the colonists arrived, they thought that they were seeing water buffalo, what they saw in Africa. And so they said buffalo, but the scientific term is bison. And there's American bison, Canadian wood bison, and even European bison.
Okay. All right. Going back, Jennifer, may I ask you follow-up questions? I know that I've seen the plans for the 8 acres that you all have attained, and that I saw the map, and it's, wonderfully laid out. And I just wanted to ask, like, how have the plans been going with the 8 acres that you have? And do you have any update from what I read about your plans on the website?
Ah. Well, that 8 acres was such a gift. Like Lucille said, to get a piece of your homelands back is truly, it was mind-blowing and absolutely amazing. It was 1.67 million for the 8 acres of land. And that's just because of where we are located. We're located on the island of Martha's Vineyard, and our homelands are in Aquina. So it's extremely expensive. And I thought for sure there was no way anyone was going to donate that amount of money to buy such a small amount of land. But lo and behold, it happened. We are working with South Mountain and another South Mountain and Whole Systems Design. And that design phase will be starting in March. And then we look to be groundbreaking in September 26. And so we have to wait a little bit longer just to get the design phase going. And we're okay with that. We wanted to make sure that who we partnered with to do the design and build were people who aligned with our values. And South Mountain is known to be very environmentally friendly, looking forward to the future for climate change. We wanted people who were aligned with our value system. So we're willing to wait for them. The whole project the building of the project is going to cost between $4 to $6 million. And so we're okay with also that taking a little bit of time because we have to raise those funds. And that is, big numbers. So that's the update I have on that. It's just a few months away and we're eager to get going, but at the same time, I'm okay with waiting because that's a lot of money. And in a way it's good too, because I keep seeing new things being developed, new ways of creating energy. So in the town of Aquina, there are no fossil fuels allowed. So we will be looking at alternative ways of running the whole thing. So
Wow.
a lot of research to do.
Wow. That's great news. May I ask follow-up questions on that? How are you going to do that?
Raise the money.
Well, I mean, no fossil fuels.
Oh, no fossil fuels. So
yeah,
right, there's electric, solar panels. There's some other alternative methods too that are being investigated. So we've got a lot to learn. We're really relying on people who know what they're doing in that area, because if we have a food pantry, we got to make sure that, if we lose power and we're in the Northeast on the ocean, that our food doesn't go bad. So that's another reason why it's really important for us to look at Indigenous ways of storing food. What can we do to store foods and how can we preserve them that requires less energy? So we're really looking to reduce that footprint and to build better ways of doing things.
well, that's an exciting model, lots of ambition there, and I'm really looking forward to following up with you and reading about that in the future. That's great. Thank you. We do have a good question here for Lucille. Do you have any advice for Indigenous peoples and allies to build not only kinships with each other, but relationships to government agencies to provide access to places that promote cultural revitalization?
Yes. First of all, the USDA has made a lot of effort recently to assist what they call historically underserved communities to be able to access federal funds to purchase land. So we use I personally use the USDA beginning farmer and rancher loan to purchase this 77 acres, $577,000, 1 year, one time a year payment of $24,000. Because it's agriculture, you have time to raise your plants or your animals before you are able to make an income. So that is a very underutilized program, I feel, is USDA beginning farmer and rancher loan. There's also USDA operating loans. And there is the NRCS, which is a agency of the USDA. I believe it's National Resource Conservation Systems or something like that. But the NRCS has a cultural department as well that is working harder than before to connect Indigenous people with NRCS resources. So I definitely would say start with the USDA. They're probably some of the most lower hanging fruit in the federal agencies. And in regards to state agency, it just depends on what state you're in. But I would start with the USDA. There's some great resources out there and websites, and I'm happy to connect with anybody as well and share individually my USDA plan.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you. I'm sure some people will be trying to reach out to you for that. I love that both of you are talking about, kinship and the bonds with community, especially working with women. I have a question, I guess, for both of you. If one of you would like to respond first, I'm okay with it. But how has that empowered and changed your community by using, traditional kinship models? And, I'm guessing here, trying to leave all of the family drama at the door. This, person doesn't like this person for one reason, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and focus in on healing. I mean, for example, with Lucille's Meat for Mamas program, that is incredible. I love that. And it sounds like you're utilizing, EBT, people who need, financial assistance. And can you speak a little bit more on how that might have empowered, women in your community?
First of all, the organization as a whole, Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, I feel we have really elevated the work that has the previous 30, 40 years of Indigenous movement work that's already been in Texas. And we've just elevated because we have a buffalo harvest every year. And at this very first buffalo harvest, we had approximately 150 Lipan Apache attend. Our second buffalo harvest, we had over 200 various Texas Indigenous communities attend. And our next buffalo harvest, which is going to be at our new property on March 1st, we're going to be harvesting 2 buffalo because we expect that many more Texas Indigenous communities to attend. What I have seen is that kinship become tighter and stronger. Of course, we all can agree to disagree at times, but who doesn't love buffalo and who doesn't love buffalo meat and a good time to be together, and spend that kinship with drum, with song, with prayer, as well as harvesting and butchering a buffalo together. So it has been really beautiful. to see the various Texas Indigenous communities come together and work together in that way to just butcher buffalo and share the meat. It's so powerful and it's been so beautiful. And and so our youth camp that just finished, the youth asked me if they could work for me. And I just thought that was so awesome because they loved it and they loved the work that we're doing here. And so next year we'll be embarking on our youth pathway to buffalo caretaking program.
Wow, that's great. Jennifer, it looks like you're about to chime in. Would you like to?
Sure. So the idea of kinship for us, it crosses so many different groups and sectors. So starting with like non-native service providers, just getting together. We have what's called the COAST, the Circle of Allies and Sovereign Tribes, and we get together on an annual basis, and we stay at a camp retreat space, and we have a dinner, and we sit by a fire, and we do those sort of more native things rather than get into a conference meeting right away. We build up those bonds of friendship first, and then we do a sweat. It's not a traditional sweat because we didn't have access to that. It was a sauna, but it was still the raising of your temperature, coming out into the cold. We do it in the wintertime, and then sitting by the fire. And then the next day, attending to business. And what we found is the partnerships that we're developing with the different agencies are really strong. And sometimes we may be competing or have different ideas around different things, but we know when it comes to sexual violence, domestic violence, stalking, that we're in this together. And how we all feel, and this is a priority for all of us. And so we're able to put any differences aside and come together and be really strong and supportive to the people who need our help, which is amazing. And then same thing with other tribes. We know that sometimes as tribal cousins, we don't necessarily get along all the time. Tribal councils like to bicker and fight. But in this space, for this thing, we need to put all of that at the door and come together and work on this thing together. And we're able to then provide better support for our different tribal members who are from different tribal communities and be more supportive. And then within our young girls, like high school age girls, I have an older daughter who's, a grown adult. And I watched her come up, and there's a lot of competition among girls. Let's just be real. There is. And then I have a couple high school girls now. And through this work, we're seeing less competition among the girls and more support, and more acting like cousins should. And then even through our food program, we call it Feast Food Equity and Sovereign Traditions. We do a weekly food share, and we check in with like different family members will come in. I'm like, well, did you pick up for your mom? What about your cousin? What about your sister? And so people aren't just taking for themselves. They're taking care of all their family members and then bringing it to their houses. And it stops the mentality. Prior to this, you would see people show up to something from the tribe and they could only pick up for themselves, and then their names would get checked off on a checklist. And then each family had to come get their stuff, right? You couldn't pick up for your cousin or whoever. But this really shifts that power and puts the power back into community where you're responsible for your kinship and people are taking care of each other rather than more individualistic going directly to the individual families. So we're seeing people taking better care of one another. And I think that's what it's really about. That's how we were before. We took care of one another as community. And there was a shift away from that. So seeing things shift back to that is really encouraging. And I think that's what kinship is about.
Yes, I agree. That's a beautiful way to put it. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Lucille, for both of you speaking with us today and sharing your stories and your magnificent organizations. I just love the empowerment of youth and elders and women you both have going on in different regions in Turtle Island. Now we're going to go into our conclusions, and I would like to ask the panelists if you would like to wrap up your talk, give you a couple of minutes each to talk about one last thing or something about your organization.
First, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I think the biggest thing that we've learned and really hold dear to us is that being able to rebuild our relationships through our culture is really stepping away from more of an extractive model of living and really thinking about sustainability. How do we sustain our relationships with each other? How do we sustain our existence here on Earth? How do we sustain our relationships with the plants, with the animals? And how do we sustain healthy relationships with partners? And that's really what, when we did this work, we found out. It was about our culture, our lessons around sustainability, how to live in balance. And that's what's, driving us forward. And I think, the work that we do at Kinship Heals isn't just for now. This is a multi-generational project, multi-generational work that we're doing. And I'm sure Lucille feels the same way. And it's those old teachings in our culture and our traditions that are going to be there to help guide the next generation forward with this work.
Yes, thank you. Lucille.
Thank you, Charles, for inviting me, and First Nations Development Institute. And Jennifer, is really great to meet you. And I hope to visit you one day and invite you to also come here so we can work together. I'm really grateful to First Nations Development Institute. I took a class in 2018 called The Business of Indian Agriculture. And it's because of that class that I embarked on the USDA Beginning Farmer and Rancher Loan and created the nonprofit Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. Because it was that education of learning the importance of not just creating a business plan and thinking about how to survive, be sustainable in your own life, but how to provide for your greater community, how to be able to do something that is impactful and beneficial, not just for yourself as an individual, but for your family, your future generations, and create something that is replicable. So that's what we did with Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. We've created something that we hope other people are able to model, and with their own vision of food sovereignty, of curriculum development, of kinship building, and especially bison caretaking. So there's so many other agriculture endeavors that could be done that will help reconnect us to Mother Earth. And for us, it's working with the buffalo. There's such a powerful prophecy of the white buffalo calf woman. And that is what helps to guide the work that we do, as well as our ancestors and all the generations before, because we know where we came from and we know where we are going. And yes, because we are close to the southern border, we're literally 3 hours away from the Mexican border. We do also connect with Indigenous people on the northern side of the Mexican border. And so we're just grateful to be here. Please look us up on TexasTribalBuffaloProject.org or any of our social media. We're all over the social media handles. And if you are interested in meet, I'd love to connect. And anybody wanting to learn on buffalo caretaking from an Indigenous woman's point of view, I'm also happy to connect. And thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Lucille. And you might get an email from me about ordering some meat. Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here with us today. And thank you, Jennifer, from the Northeast Native Network of Kinship and Healing. And also thank you, Lucille, from the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. such wonderful stories both of you shared with us today. And I think that this is just a wonderful way to end our webinar series and celebrating the work, the ingenuity of Indigenous people that we're doing today. And so again, I would like to thank our sponsors, the IF20 Anti-Racism Initiative, the International Academy of Multicultural Cooperation, the United Religious Initiative, and the Seventh Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous country has been alive and well long before the first invasions, during the primary invasions, and even alongside the current invasions that we're living in right now. We have been doing what we need to do in order to fix the earth, taking care of our peoples, feeding our communities, healing our communities, singing and dancing in ceremony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That has never stopped. We did it way back then, and we're doing it right now. Today, we heard from diverse work of Indigenous peoples from Turtle Island today, on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in the middle. And today, what you heard is exactly what Seventh Generation wants to support in Indigenous country. We are doing this all over Turtle Island with different communities. And this is what Seventh Generation lives for. It's cultural workers creating justice by using tradition and modernity to make good medicine for their people. Seventh Generation Fund, we are committed to asserting our Indigenous voice, our sovereignty, and our self-determination. We are committed to the sacred knowledge of the great law of peace, to the Haudenosaunee, and thinking 7th generation to the future. The work we support throughout the Indigenous world shows our commitment to these values. And we don't just involve ourselves within Native America either. We support Indigenous work all around the planet for Indigenous rights, Indigenous sovereignty, and Indigenous self-determination is not defined just by the colonial borders we live in. I really hope that you've all learned and enjoyed this webinar series. I've had a blast today meeting Jennifer and Lucille, hearing about their stories, and all of us involved have had a wonderful time working with the organizations making this series possible. Thank you so much. I look forward to reading more about your work, Jennifer, and your work, Lucille, and Seventh Generation loves the work that you're doing. So thank you. And thank you all for listening. And please be a good ancestor. Yo.